Welcome to the Essential Self-Care Podcast, a show for those of us who are, let's face it, too busy for self-care. Each week, we bring you real-life stories and expert insights to help you create a kinder, more compassionate relationship with yourself. I'm your host, Dr. Sheetal Ajmani, a physician with over 2 decades of experience blending Eastern and Western well-being practices. As the founder of Radiant Living Institute, I'm here to help you reconnect with your own inner radiance. Remember, small changes make a large impact, and it all starts here. Please note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult your own healthcare provider about your specific situation. Now, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Essential Self-Care Podcast. I am so excited to be joined in the podcast studio today with our guest. I always love when I have local guests coming on the show where we can actually sit together physically in the same space to do the episode together and have this conversation in person. So that's what we're going to do today. Today, I am welcoming Charese Josie to the Essential Self-Care Podcast. And Charese and I met just actually a month prior to when we're sitting down here recording this episode. So I was honored to be invited to deliver a keynote address at the closing summit of the Women Who Lead program, which is facilitated by and created and led by Black Brand here in Hampton Roads. And Women Who Lead is a 12-week, just a quick shout out to them and a little bit about what they are about because they're doing incredible work as well. So Women Who Lead is a 12-week professional development accelerator program, and it helps minority women improve their leadership skills, access traditionally male-dominated industries, and gain certifications to obtain higher paying wages and access to contract opportunities. And Charese was actually graduating from the program, and we had the opportunity to chat a little bit there. And as I got to learn more about her and the work that she was doing, I just knew I wanted to invite her here today. So a little bit more about Charese. Charese is a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of CJ Counseling and Consulting Services, where her mission is to reimagine corporate dynamics by enhancing emotional intelligence and fostering authentic relationships from the C-suite to frontline supervisors. She is also the author of Two Witty Girls, a book that explores leadership lessons from a child's view. She has been featured on media outlets, including The Today Show, Essence, Cosmopolitan, The Washington Post, Shape, and NPR. It is such an honor to have you here today. Welcome to the show, Charese.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited about our conversation. And today, Charese is going to share a little bit from her expertise, talking about the 8 dimensions of wellness and holistic self-care. So right up my alley, right up the alley for this show. So let's start there. Can you tell us, well, before we dive into exactly what the 8 dimensions of wellness are, can you tell us why it's important to look at these 8 dimensions of wellness? Like, why is this framework important and useful? And then if we could dive into what exactly those 8 dimensions of wellness are.
Absolutely. So I work in my private practice with women leaders. And so I have that on my advertisement, all of my marketing is women leaders. And on their consultation form, I'll ask, do you consider yourself a leader? And they will say yes. And then I will ask, well, what's bringing you to counseling? What do you want to work on? And I have not had one client say they want to work on how to be a better leader. It's about who they are. It's about their relationships. Sometimes it's finances, and sometimes it's just all interwoven. So the 8 dimensions kind of solidifies that we are just not one-dimensional people. And although we may recognize our role and who we are in our role and people we're responsible for and people who count on us, it still does not mean there's a part of me that I know needs some attention. And that's what they come into therapy for. And so this holistic approach really resonates with me. And in my work with women leaders, it's because it encompasses that holistic approach. And so while we're working and they say, I know I have this responsibility, but there's this underlying thing I need to address. And we're going to touch, if not most, on a lot of these dimensions during our work together. because it just intersects in who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Goodness, I love that. And I want to just pull out already just a couple of things that you shared. First of all, I love, in the sort of coaching and personal development world, we talk a lot about like the questions that we ask and like the questions that we ask ourselves, like that can provide such valuable information. And so that's why it's often, when you're working with someone like a therapist or a coach or a guide or a facilitator in some ways, often it's those questions that they ask to prompt you to the answers that are already within yourself.
Right.
And so I love that question of that you ask all of your clients, like, do you consider yourself a leader? And then I know that's really leading into that second question of like what you want to work on together in counseling. But even just there, I even just really like that question of like, do you consider yourself a leader in terms of thinking about like taking that a step further of like, what does being a leader mean to you? And we can be leaders in so many different aspects of our lives too. I think often, well, for me, when I initially think of it, I think of it in terms of career, but like how are we leading ourselves in, for example, these different 8 dimensions of wellness and these different aspects of our lives, right? Like, because particularly, and I work primarily with, I always say I focus on working with women, although I don't work exclusively with women. Often we are leading in many ways our family life, raising children or taking care of aging parents or, in so many different dimensions. And so it also makes me think of that, like expanding on that idea of like who we are as a leader and specifically looking at, these different dimensions that we're going to talk about too. So I just thought that was really, really interesting. And also that many of the people that come see you are actually looking to address different aspects of themselves that they see need, as the words you used, needs more attention. And I think that's just part of, like you said, looking at sort of the whole person, that we are whole entire multifaceted individuals. And we were just chatting a little bit before we started the recording about how we are all complex, just like as humans, complex and multifaceted. So that being said, and sort of setting that context and setting that stage, can you go into what these 8 dimensions of wellness are and what we need to know about them?
Absolutely. So keeping in mind, this 8 dimensions are a holistic approach. And so as I go through them, I don't want anyone listening to think, oh my gosh, I don't have this one. I'm not good in this area. We're not meant to be perfect, but it is important that we have a self-awareness, right, in different areas. So one is our physical wellness. How are we taking care of ourselves physically? Exercising, nutrition. Not that we all have to be fitness stars, right? But do we have some type of physical activity? So that's number one, is physical. And the second one is our emotional well-being. Now, that one's a lot harder to pinpoint, right, in terms of our wellness. Like, well, how do I know if it's emotional? Maybe it's this person or this situation. And that's where some of that questionnaire and that insight comes from. Like, what level of insight are people coming to me with already? And so then I know how to work with them and communicate with them a little bit better. That's helpful to them. But what is our emotional wellness? So that's number 2. And number 3 is our social. We need social interactions. But those social interactions get to be individualized, right? I get to determine what level of social interaction is beneficial to my well-being, right? So being here with you is helpful because I think it's mutually beneficial in conversation and knowledge and those types of things. Or other people may have different definitions of social. So allow your definition to be okay with you. Just know, am I meeting that need of being social, right? Am I getting that connection with some other human being in a way that works for you? So that's number 3. And number 4 is our intellectual. Are we being stimulated? Are we learning something new? And it can be simple, right? It can be a recipe. My daughters want to join the gardening club in the 6th grade. I'm like, okay, we haven't gardened at home with me, I think she did with her dad when she was a toddler, but that's about it. But intellectual, right? What are we learning and what's stimulating our brains? And just our own level of, I'm growing, right? I'm expanding. And number 5 is environmental wellness. This is the world around us. What environments are we in? Whether we're living, occupational, what are we in that's adding or maybe not contributing very well to our wellness? Number 6 is our spiritual lives. Now, everyone may not be spiritual or religious or depending on those types of things, but who do you answer to? Right? And so some people in religious, they can say, this religious being, a spiritual being, this is who I answer to. But who is your accountability for you within you? And I think we all get to decide what that is. Number 7 is occupational wellness, right? And that's sometimes we have the most challenge, right? Because we have to meet our financial needs and then we want to contribute, but we also don't want our job or occupation deplete us. But sometimes we have to make some hard decisions, right, in our occupational journey. But looking at our occupational wellness, and sometimes that may require making some challenging decisions, right, for a period of time for a larger goal. But are you satisfied in your work that you're doing and what you're contributing? And the last one is our financial wellness. And there's this show on Netflix, and I reference it a lot because I really like it. I'm not a fan of the title, but I like the message. It's called How to Get Rich. And a financial advisor, Ramit Sethi, will go to different homes and will ask people about what they want. And a lot of people have these financial goals or they're in debt and these different things. And he always asks a key question is, what do you want your rich life to look like? Mm-hmm. And what he means by that is, what is your vision for your life? How do you want your life to feel? And that's what I ask a lot of people when I work with them, like, how do you want to feel? Mm-hmm. Right. And so some examples, even from this show, one guy said, you know what? I just want to be able to go out and skateboard. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so we don't have to clear out all your debt and work at everything and make you rich. He just want to go out and skateboard. And that's his life that he wants to desire. So when we talk about finances, yes, we want to make sure we can cover our expenses and our care and all these things. That's important. But in addition to that, an extension of that is also, how do you want your life to feel, right? And so do you have the finances in a way that you can get what you want to do? So a quick example is I value time. So as I'm making decisions and doing things, am I meeting my need and my desire of having time and space in my life? And what finances do I need to do that, to have that time?
This was incredible. And as you're talking and sharing these and sharing some insights and really just scratching the surface on each of these, I'm like, we could do an entire, not even an entire episode on each of these dimensions, but like an entire day just like focused on exploring these. So we're really just scratching the surface here, but so many great points and insights for us to think about with each of these. And so I'm just going to recap a little bit and also just ask some follow-up questions too. Before we go on, I'm excited to share something that could really make a positive impact on your life. Do you feel like you've lost touch with your true self? Reclaim Your Radiance is Radiant Living Institute's signature coaching program designed to help you reclaim your worth, renew your energy, and restore your happiness in your life, career, and relationships. This 6-module program has already helped countless women regain control of their lives. Whether by setting boundaries in challenging relationships, finding strength through life transitions like divorce, pivoting in their careers, or rediscovering their purpose as they embrace new chapters of their life. Start your journey today and begin living authentically, unapologetically, and radiantly once again. Head over to radiantlivinginstitute.com/reclaim-your-radiance to get started. I hope you found that helpful, and if you're ready to explore this more, check out the link in the show notes. Now, let's jump back into today's episode. So just as a quick sort of in a list form recap of those 8 dimensions, emotional, social, intellectual, environmental, spiritual, occupational, and financial.
And physical.
Oh, and physical. Mm-hmm. That's right. Thank you. And one common theme that I heard throughout all of these dimensions that I heard you as you were speaking of them, I want to draw out for our listeners. It's something that I find is so important. It's something that I work on with my clients as well. And that is that within each of these dimensions, you get to define what that means to you and what that looks like for you.
100%.
Not your mama, not your neighbor, not your boss. Like, you get to define it. And that's so powerful because I think for many of us, perhaps, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I think for many of us, for many years, we can, grow into what we think society expects for us in all of these dimensions, or what we see everyone around us doing within these dimensions. And we can often, and this has certainly been my experience and a lot of the clients I work with as well, of make ourselves feel guilty or be especially hard on ourselves for maybe not meeting certain expectations that we think are expected of us, or that we've put on ourselves, or that we just, through what we see in society and cultural conditioning, we think is expected of us until we reach a certain season. It's not even a particular age. It's not, I don't think, a particular stage in life. I think it's more of a certain season in life, like what you're going through, that. And for many of us, it's multiple seasons like that, because like you said, there's all these different dimensions, right? So a certain season might bring to light in a certain specific dimension, like, wait, what is really important to me in that aspect of my life? Like, wait, I've just been kind of running with, trying to keep up with everyone else in this dimension. But wait a second, what's really important to me about this? Just like you gave that example with the finances, at least, like, okay, there may be a certain financial goal and you may be like, oh, that would be amazing. Right. But is that what you really want? Like, or is it that a certain feeling or time, like you gave in that example of like being able to skateboard, or, or spending time with your children? Like, you get to decide that. And then same, you also gave an example of that with the social aspect, the social dimension, and how that's very individualized, right? Like, we all have different, as human beings, we're all social relational beings. So we all need some aspect and dimension of that, but that can look different for so many of us, right? Like, some of us need to be around people all the time and we feel, energized by that. Some of us, it's, an hour a day of like high intense social activity, and then really recharging at home in quiet and solitude. And it's different for all of us, and knowing that, and that's why I wanted to sort of draw out that theme, that thread that I heard as you were explaining each of these, for our listeners to, as you're at home, if you're thinking about these different dimensions in your own life, really knowing and thinking about what it means to you.
Right. Yeah, I think we all get to make our own definition. I think the challenge comes in is that how will someone else deal with our decisions in life? And we have to accept and allow other people to sit in their own disappointments and allow them to pivot in their own time. So maybe we might think that we're on this journey and we brought our friends and family along with us, but then when we pivot and change, now it's like, whoa, how do I tell them, right? And how do I tell them this is my new interest, or this is the direction I'm going in my life? Well, allow them to adjust, and they will in their own time. And if they choose not to, I think it's also healthy to respect someone else's version of self-care for themselves, right? Of how they want to navigate, how we want to pivot our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I found, and this is again from my personal experience as well as clients I've worked with, I found that often that sort of fear of how other people are going to respond to, maybe our new definitions of these certain areas of our life and what we want that to look like. I often find that my own internal dialogue of what I think that's going to look like is way worse than what it actually is.
That's very true, yes.
And that generally the people in our life, generally, for the most part, are quite accepting of that. And there might be a bit of a transition period as certain things and dynamics might shift a little bit. But generally, those people who truly are on your side, who truly care about you and love and respect you, do understand that. And especially when they see that you're doing this to take better care
Mm-hmm.
of yourself, to feel more whole, to feel more like yourself. And now there are, as you mentioned, there are going to be those few people who maybe don't like it, and maybe they're just not your tribe anymore, and that can be hard and that can be sad, and there can be a grieving process associated with that as well. But ultimately, as you're addressing these to step into like the highest, most holistic version of yourself.
Perfectly said. Like we have the same values, so funny, which is why I'm excited about being here. And I think as we talk about self-care to get to our highest self and even addressing these 8 dimensions, there's going to be a time where we have to subtract, right? And sometimes we want to add and add and add people, add things. But sometimes you have to take some time to say, you know what, I'm at a different level in my life. Maybe it's a different thought process. Maybe it's a different just experience that you're at. And everyone is not going to be able to meet you where you're at or where you're going to have to go. And as you said, I think it's completely fine to grieve that as we're also accepting that and moving along and just think about the positives of that experience. And maybe that experience help to catapult you into this next level that you're in, right? And that can be the gratitude part as we're also grieving and accepting the changes in our own life. And I think both can still be true and both can still be okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that, like the word and
Mm-hmm.
that two seemingly separate different things can be true at the
Yes.
same time. It's so important to remember
Yes.
because as we said when we started, like we as humans and life in general are complex and multifaceted.
Yes.
So that means multiple things can exist at the same time,
Mhm.
and all of it can still be very, very valid. And you also brought up this idea in that idea of like subtraction when you were talking about environmental, where you talked about looking at like our environment that we've built around us, and is that adding to us, or is that or are there things in that environment that are no longer serving us, and so I mean, you can think of it almost like, I think of it almost as, a few years ago, maybe it's more than a few years ago now, Marie Kondo and the whole Spark Joy movement got really big, and I got into it, and I still do it myself, like in my own, with my like belongings. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm not going to go into it in detail right now for time's sake, so you can Google it, and maybe I'll do another episode about it. But basically, it's like going through your space and a process of decluttering, right? Of looking at like what serves you, what brings you joy, and what does not. And it's such a yeah, it's such a valuable process, and it's a great way to like practice it with things in your environment. I feel like with things like clothes and stuff, but then those same principles do apply to other aspects of your life.
Yes,
but it's like a way where you can start to practice it. That's a bit of a lower stakes way to practice it. And then practicing that with like relationships and job and career and things like that. But for time's sake, and as we're starting to wrap up this episode, again, as I said before, there is so much. I mean, I feel like I could chat with you for like days about this. But for time's sake, and as we begin to wrap up, I want to, part of my intention with this show is also to, educate, inspire, empower, individuals to make self-care a priority in their own life, and also to make it accessible.
Yeah.
And so you've described like these eight steps for someone who is listening to this episode. Where do you think would be a good place for them to start with working with these 8 dimensions of wellness? Would it be kind of looking at it as a whole? Would it be picking one, working with that? Like, how would you suggest that someone get started?
So I'm being in my therapy mode just for a quick moment, right? I want you to kind of imagine that you're in this blank space and you get to design the space. For the moment, don't make it true. It doesn't matter how these things are going to happen or how you're going to afford it. What does it look like to you? What colors do you envision? What place do you envision? If you envision yourself out in the meadows dancing in daisies, fine, let's go with that, right? First, I want you to see, how do you even want to feel, right? What feels good to you? And try different things. If you're out in the morning time, do you feel more relaxed in the morning time? Then try something else in the evening. What do you feel, right? And what you want to learn is like, what is it about me that I enjoy? that's the time of day. That can be the time of year, right? And then do I enjoy being around a lot of people, a little bit of people? Does it depend on the conversations? I want you to test all those things, right? Because you get to not do it anymore. If you decide that you don't like it, I tried it. It was a cool experience, but I don't think this is something that I want to do. And what you're building as you're trying these things, you're building courage. Mm-hmm. And you're building courage to say, I don't think this is for me. And you're exercising that muscle of no, this is not something I want to do. And you're also exercising that muscle of, I like this. I want to learn more about this. I want to try this again. And then as you navigate these 8 dimensions, that feeling that now has embedded in you, that thought process and that courage of, I get to explore. I want to continue or I don't. It starts to become second nature as you're trying these things. And then as you get a little, as you said earlier, there are some harder challenges that will come along. But let's start with a great baseline that as you navigate into the harder challenges for you, then your confidence in yourself is there to navigate when you get to that space. But I think we could start off kind of low.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been such an incredible conversation. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here and to share this with us. For anyone who's listening who would like to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
Yes, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or my website. Both are at Charese Josie.
Perfect. And I will be including those links in the show notes below. So check it out. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
I know you have so many choices for how to spend your time. So I thank you for being here today with Essential Self-Care. As a gift, download your free workbook, 6 simple yet powerful steps to create your radiant life at radiantlivinginstitute.com and start your journey to a more radiant you.